Steeped in Southern charm and old money, this is New Orleans, Louisiana. But this is the wealthy side of town, just a short ride away from poverty-stricken, crumbling New Orleans, a city polarized by the haves and have-nots.
We turn people away every night. I mean, once our beds are filled, we have no choice but to turn people away, of course.
Every day it's the same story here at the Brantley Baptist Centre, one of the few emergency shelters in the city. Homeless men start queuing late afternoon. Inside, the women are already being fed before being given a bed for the night. In the morning, each will be back on the street, fighting for a bed here the next night.
Probably the average stay is about 6 weeks, but what's disheartening for me is that when someone comes here and they seem to be caught in a cycle in which they just are seemingly unable to wrestle themselves out of homelessness.
New Orleans is suffering crisis fatigue. With as many as 19,000 people homeless, it's stuck in a cycle of short-term sheltering and few long-term solutions.
One problem has been that no one has focused on a single solution. I think the approach of the government here locally has largely been to give money to the service providers in hopes that if you adequately provide services and this type of thing, that homeless people will evaporate into the mist.
Our houses here in New Orleans, instead of sitting straight down on the concrete, they sit up on what we call piers.
Tight.
What we're going to be building here, and there's actually 4 lots, is that we're going to have 4 roughly 1,100 square foot, 3-bedroom houses.
Jim Pate and his group Habitat for Humanity have been battling to help a different group of homeless. They build houses for the working poor, families with an income so low they still can't afford a roof over their heads.
So that's 57 feet right there.
We're probably talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 60, 75,000 people, and we've got approximately 46% of our children who live at or below the poverty level.
Okay, I'm going to go all the way down.
New Orleans has had its share of funding for the homeless, but like many cities, too much of it has been wasted.
It's not simply that there's been a lot of money put in. There have been bureaucratic costs and expenses that have reduced it. There have been, frankly, inefficiencies and I won't say misappropriation, but misapplication of funding or unwise application.
Now the city has reached a crossroads. It will drown in its social problems if it fails to house the multiplying poor.
In a very short period of time, she has had a tremendous impact on housing in New York.
In a room high above the Mississippi River, civic leaders have turned to New Yorker Roseanne Haggerty, a woman with a simple, ambitious mission.
Our organization is, I suppose, distinguished by our belief that homelessness is a solvable problem.
The answer, it seems, lies in New York. Roseanne Haggerty founded the Common Ground community, and its first project was the Times Square Hotel.
The Times Square back in '90 was in bankruptcy and a real wreck, sort of sliding into oblivion, and we were brainstorming about what would a solution be that would allow the building to be saved and be some type of housing resource for people in need.
The hotel was used for years to house the homeless in squalor.
It was just rampant drug use, prostitution, and we had even mothers prostituting their kids onto the streets and into the video arcades at 42nd Street at the time. It was really quite horrendous.
Bill Daly was a director in the New York City Mayor's office when Roseanne Haggerty came to see him. At the time, his job was overseeing the redevelopment of Times Square.
She came to me because I was then the mayor's representative and basically said, well, here's what we'd like to do with the Times Square. We want to put the homeless and veterans and crazy people and all that. And I said, oh my God. I said, I don't need this. Not another bunch of do-gooders coming in trying to clean up the neighborhood, because we had enough of them. And I said, I don't think this is going to fly.
This organization that was, saying we're going to do this project was about 2 months old at that point. And they were like, even if it's a good idea, who are you?
And did you at times think, am I nuts? Is no one getting this?
Well, I was thinking not that no one's getting this, but maybe they're right. Maybe I am nuts.
It was a massive undertaking. The historic building was derelict. Built in 1922 as a luxury hotel, it began a downhill slide that ended with more than 1,700 building code violations in the 80s. A landlord was pocketing subsidies for the homeless in a building where elderly tenants were too afraid to leave their rooms. With Roseanne trumpeting the cause, she convinced big business, the mayor's office and welfare services to back her vision of supportive housing.
I think Roseanne is a great propagandist. I mean, she really won me over very, very easily. And I don't know whether it was her personality or the force of the ideas itself or the people around her.
Or the combination?
A combination of everything, probably. And it just seemed like a great idea, and I got behind it, and so did a lot of the movers and shakers in Times Square.
The first radical step was to offer combined housing for the homeless and local low-income workers.
We have 652 tenants, all single adults and all single occupancy apartments. Half of the tenants are individuals who were homeless before moving here. We have 220 individuals who are chronically and persistently mentally ill. We have another 50 tenants with full-blown AIDS, not just HIV, but AIDS. And on the other side, we've got 326 low-income working people at the time they apply. Everything from actors, musicians, a few teachers, people who work at the hotels in the area.
So is this a standard room?
Yes, this is pretty average size room.
It could be an explosive mix, if not for the hands-on approach.
Generally, the largest problem that we have is people who are not paying their rent. And usually that's a sign of something else. It's a sign that they've relapsed or using drugs again, or that they're not taking their medication and whatnot. So we'll actually work with them pretty heavily and pretty, a lot before we'll take them to court.
You have to pay your rent on time, and you have to be a good neighbor. So if your behavior is disruptive, if it puts anyone else in the building at risk, and it's not addressed and corrected upon notice, we will utilize the court system. We hate to, but we will.
So successful has the Times Square model proved, it's been used on 3 more premises, including New York's historic Prince George Hotel on 28th Street. Joe Carr is living proof the scheme works. Actor and bartender, he's been at the Prince George for 18 months and is now training to be a physical instructor.
I just got an A- in kinesiology, so I want to know why I didn't get an A, but that's okay.
It's hard to believe he's been anything but a pillar of health and moderation. But 2 years ago, his was a very different story.
At that time, I was in a shelter on Woods Island. That's up near Harlem in Manhattan, which is really, it's one step away from the penitentiary. It's really close. Not trying to work my way out of a problem, but not addressing the fact that I had drugs and alcohol issues. While I was still in the shelter, I had gotten a job tending bar, and I had also gotten some acting work. And I had lost both due to excessive drinking. And something in my head just kind of clicked. This is my home. All right.
Right.
pardon the mess, but I've been studying like crazy.
Yeah, so
it's midterm time.
Yeah, bachelor pad.
Yeah.
Everything here is yours, essentially.
Oh,
it's yours, it's your space.
Definitely my space. It's sometimes not kept as well as it should be, but it's mine to be able to do that.
It's a source of pride his father got to see him sober before passing away.
This was from my dad. And a lot of
Common ground, he says, helps you help yourself.
Did you think 2 years ago you'd be getting an A- in?
I never thought they would accept me to school. Actually, I went over the grades again to make sure it was right.
It may be small, but it's home and it's his. He has the lease to prove it.
I've been an actor all my life, and to live on 28th Street, Manhattan, is a dream come true. You know, so as long as they'll let me stay, I'll be here.
The common ground approach gives the homeless a roof and a community. They're no longer society's cast-offs. Making it work, though, has taken a lot of fine-tuning. The right building, the right tenants, and the on-site services they need. Bought with a low-interest loan from the city, the Times Square Hotel survives with clever financing. Corporate investors are attracted by a reward of tax savings. Each resident gives a third of whatever they earn. The poorest bring in rental subsidies.
This type of model solves a lot of problems. I absolutely believe this is a model that not just can, but has proven itself able to travel.
Common Ground has made a dent in New York's homeless numbers, but it's still fighting for a policy shift away from short-term band-aids towards long-term solutions.
There are more people in New York who are homeless now than at any time since the city shelter system has existed over the last 23 years. The city has vast resources tied up in their emergency systems, spending over $1 billion a year in housing families and individuals, in emergency shelters and in housing.
Back in New Orleans, the city has all the empty buildings it needs to house the homeless. And now, for the first time, all those needed to make it happen have come to the table.
We've got to share information. We've got to have a common strategy. We've got to get focused on getting people into housing instead of getting people into shelter.
Yes, we could do more, and we all in this room could do more.
We need to start today, okay, with the people in this room, getting the word out.
It's my hope, I think, and the hope of a lot of people here, that if we use a model such as Common Ground or our own local variation of it, and we all come together and we get a project done, we're all going to sit there, pat each other on the back and say, okay, what's the next project?